In the icy waters of the North Atlantic in 1942, German U-boats prowl like wolves, their sleek silhouettes gliding quietly beneath the stormy surface. For their crews, those nights become a twisted playground, filled with the thrill of the hunt. They call this period the happy time, but for the Allies it transforms the ocean into a graveyard. Convoys dissolve in darkness, while sailors vanish, leaving loved ones in worry and uncertainty. Old depth charges are tossed in desperation, but they fail to find their mark, exploding far from their intended targets. German captains laugh, convinced that their deadly timing has rendered them untouchable. They thrive on this bravado, unaware that each sustained night of prowling tilts the balance closer to a bitter reckoning. In the shadowy confines of the Royal Navy's engineering offices, a sense of urgency hung in the air like the thick fog rolling over the Thames. Each month, as the toll of sunken ships mounted, so did the desperation of British commanders. The lifeblood of the nation was being cut off piece by piece as U-boats prowled the Atlantic with devastating efficiency. The conventions of naval warfare, once reliable, now seemed to undergo a dark transformation. Current weapons systems relied heavily on guesswork. Sonar might provide a fleeting glimpse of a submarine's position, but once a destroyer rumbled overhead, ready to unleash depth charges, that contact was lost. The momentary hope was so quickly replaced by frustration. Most explosions occurred only after the U-boats had quietly slipped away, like phantoms in the night. Amidst this growing crisis, a group of British engineers gathered in secret, their minds racing against the clock. They were charged with a daunting task: to reverse the dreadful trend and protect the vital convoys. In hushed voices, they posed an outrageous question. What if we could launch explosives forward instead of trailing them behind? What if the bombs could be designed to only detonate upon impact, ensuring a deadly surprise for the enemy? It sounded almost preposterous, like a peculiar game of what if among frustrated minds. But from this madness, a revolutionary idea began to take shape. They envisioned an uncommon weapon, one that would not only breach the walls of traditional naval combat, but also flip the script entirely. This new armament would strike first, rather than respond to the U-boats' stealthy maneuvers, a potential game-changer that promised to keep even the most calculated captain of a submerged vessel awake at night. As blueprints were drawn and prototypes carefully constructed, excitement mingled with skepticism. Would this strange invention truly become a reality, or was it merely a fantasy fueled by desperation? This obsession with pushing technological limits would soon become a haunting reminder of the horrors of war, not just for the enemy, but for those who dared to create such a terrifying new tool of destruction. The atmosphere was electric, tinged with the danger of their pursuit. In those quiet offices, where hope mixed with fear, a new dawn for naval warfare was lurking on the horizon, threatening to reshape the oceans forever. As the sun dips over the horizon, casting golden light across the quiet British shipyard, a scene unfolds that's as remarkable as it is unprecedented. Here, in the midst of World War II, a group of dedicated scientists and sailors is hard at work assembling what appears to be an alien contraption, a series of 24 stubby metal tubes mounted in rows on the deck of an escort ship. They affectionately call their creation the Hedgehog. At first glance, its spiky appearance seems almost whimsical, but within that odd exterior lies a revolutionary innovation that could change the tide of naval warfare. Each of these tubes is designed to fire a small spigot mortar, each projectile packed with approximately 30 pounds of high explosive. What sets the Hedgehog apart from its predecessors, namely the dreaded depth charge, is its precision. Instead of exploding in a broad area, the Hedgehog's bombs are engineered to make direct contact with a submarine. This means no warnings, no wasted explosions, and interference with sonar locks is a thing of the past. Imagine the tension aboard these escort ships as the first prototypes make their debut. The captains eye the device with skepticism, their brows furrowed by the weight of experience. They've witnessed the fizzled promises of so-called miracle inventions in the unforgiving theatre of war. What if this too was destined for failure? The uncertainty hangs heavy in the salty air, mingling with the restless waves. But amid the doubts, there's a flicker of hope. Picture the young sailors, fresh-faced yet hardened by the increasing conflict, huddling around the Hedgehog. They share stories of lost comrades, of missed opportunities. In a world filled with chaos and uncertainty, there's a shared longing for a breakthrough that will tip the balance in their favor. Their nightmares of unseen submarines lurking below can turn into dreams of victory if only this odd-looking weapon can do what it promises. As the day of the first trials approaches, anxieties ripple through the fleet. Yet in the hearts of these men and women, scientists and sailors alike, burns a quiet determination. They have pooled their hopes into this invention. It is more than just a weapon. It's a symbol of resilience, a bold step towards reclaiming control in a bleed of chaos. And as the sun finally sets, the Hedgehog sits ready for its maiden launch, a silent promise to the men aboard, and perhaps to a nation watching with bated breath. What happens next will alter the course of battle and history itself. The early morning light struggled to pierce the heavy shroud of clouds that blanketed the icy waters of the North Atlantic in early 1943. Aboard the HMS Westcott, the crew moved with a quiet intensity, each man acutely aware of their purpose, escorting vital convoys through one of the world's deadliest maritime theatres. The biting chill was a constant reminder of the threats that lurked beneath the waves, but despite the frigid temperatures, a sense of resolve filled the air. Then, without warning, a sonar ping sliced through the silence, a contact at 1,200 yards. The captain's eyes narrowed, instinctively sensing the moment had come. He'd stationed them on this perilous mission, and today they were not merely doing a job, they were fighting back. He turned to the crew and commanded the launch of the Hedgehog, a revolutionary weapon that until recently had been the subject of skepticism. Just like that, 24 mortars, each armed with a depth charge, erupted from the foredeck, shooting into the menacing depths below. The sound echoed across the empty expanse of the Atlantic like thunder, and for a heartbeat, time stood still. The crew, their hearts pounding, listened intently as seconds felt like an eternity. Almost imperceptibly, the tension on the ship tightened. Everyone was holding their breath. Then it happened. A sudden explosion ripped through the water, followed by another. The crew erupted into cheers, though they all knew the gravity of the act. Moments later, the surface broke apart, spewing oil, splintered wood, and wreckage into the air, a spectacle of destruction that marked the defeat of yet another adversary. The U-boat had been neutralized in seconds, and the Hedgehog had drawn first blood. This strike sent shockwaves through the Naval Command. Reports flooded back to the Admiralty, and the tone surrounding the once laughed-at contraption began to shift. What had been seen as a frivolous experiment was now revered for its deadly precision and speed. The age of submarines, those steely predators lurking unseen beneath the waves, was suddenly in jeopardy. The crew aboard the Westcott could feel it. They were part of something pivotal, something that would change the course of naval warfare. That icy day in the vast Atlantic, amidst wreckage and oil, marked not just a victory, but the dawn of a new era where the cloak of submarine invincibility was slowly unraveling. The sea and sky were still grey, but for the first time, the horizon felt a little brighter, a little more hopeful. As the summer of 1943 rolled in, a shadow loomed over Dönitz's once feared wolf packs. The ocean, their hunting ground, now harboured an unseen menace: hedgehogs. These new convoy escorts had transformed the harsh, unforgiving Atlantic into a death trap for U-boats. For the crews aboard these submarines, the atmosphere shifted dramatically. Fear crept into their hearts, a stark contrast to the previous year's confidence. Survivors shared tales that chilled their comrades, a faint sound reverberating overhead, A series of soft pops followed by a bone-shaking roar that ripped through the hull like a feral beast. "You never saw it coming," one survivor recounted, his hands trembling as he spoke. "One moment, everything was normal. The next, you were fighting for breath in a sinking tomb." Reports flooding in spoke of Dönitz's once proud fleet grappling with confusion. The commanders strained to decode the chaos without answers, a new weapon of unknown origin, striking with precision but revealing no pattern. The confident laughter that once echoed during patrols devolved into hushed conversations filled with dread. The term death ships soon became the whispered reference for any convoy protected by these Hedgehog escorts, instilling a palpable fear that paralyzed even the bravest of sailors. This change was not just tactical, it disrupted the very morale and camaraderie within the ranks. No longer were they the insatiable hunters of the Atlantic, they were haunted by the spectre of a new merciless adversary that left them no room to maneuver, forcing them to confront an uncertain fate beneath the waves. As reports trickled in from the North Atlantic, a palpable sense of urgency gripped Berlin. The nation's engineers based in Kiel were poring over fragmentary accounts of newly developed anti-submarine technology, trying to unravel the mystery plaguing their U-boats. Could it be magnetic mines, one engineer speculated, or perhaps sophisticated sonic fuses? The uncertainty weighed heavily on every decision they made, sparking debates that echoed through the corridors of power. In their scramble to adapt, countermeasures were hastily rushed into production. Thicker hull plates were introduced with the hope of reinforcing the beleaguered vessels. Engineers advocated for faster crash dives, believing perhaps that speed would be their ally against this unseen enemy. Decoys designed to mislead enemy sonar were deployed, trailing behind the subs like phantoms in the water. Yet disappointment mounted as every patchwork solution failed to provide the expected reprieve. The dreaded truth began to emerge. No matter how deep or how swiftly a U-boat could descend, it wouldn't matter against the Hedgehog's contact-fused projectiles. It was a grim realization. The depth wasn't their refuge, and it felt like the ocean itself was turning against them. Trapped underwater, crew members listened as the silence became deafening, only broken by the chilling evidence of captured logs from damaged convoys. The scenario they painted was harrowing. Sudden sonar silence, followed by the unmistakable expulsion of massive air bubbles, an ominous signal that another U-boat had been lost. Even the seasoned commanders, those who had once shrugged off the capabilities of escort ships, began to re-evaluate their arrogance. Confronted with the barrage of reports detailing the shifts in this deadly game of cat and mouse, it dawned on them. For the first time in the war, the hunters had become the hunted. The once stealthy U-boats, symbols of German ingenuity, were now tarnished by a mounting dread as they lurked in the depths of a frigid ocean, once a realm of conquest, now a daunting source of fear. As the war raged on, the stakes became higher, and each side raced to outmaneuver the other. It was during this tense landscape that the US Navy got wind of a revolutionary anti-submarine weapon, the Hedgehog. Picture this: destroyer escorts, sleek and powerful, were making their way across the treacherous Atlantic from Boston to Liverpool. These ships were more than just vessels, they were lifelines for the Allies, transporting troops and supplies across enemy-infested waters. When the Navy officially adopted the Hedgehog, a revolutionary mortar system that could launch multiple projectiles ahead of the ship, it marked a pivotal shift in the battle against the German U-boats. Imagine the engineers hunched over blueprints and schematics, engines humming in the background as they innovated on this newfound technology. Inspired by the Hedgehog, they set their sights on an even bolder advancement, the mousetrap. This rocket-propelled variant of the Hedgehog was designed to launch projectiles further and with greater precision. Instead of just hoping to catch a submarine in its grasp, American engineers wanted an explosive punch that could reach the depths where U-boats lurked unseen. The crew aboard these destroyers didn't just see themselves as soldiers. They were guardians of their comrades on distant shores, prompted by the urgency of their task, believing they held the balance of life and death in their hands. As these enhancements sailed into the Atlantic, radar and sonar technology augmented combat strategy. The Allies were no longer just responding to threats. They were intercepting and attacking before the enemy even knew they were there. Imagine the tension on board the destroyers, eyes glued to their radar screens, waiting for contact, knowing that every moment counted. This newfound capability turned the once menacing Atlantic, previously a haven for German U-boats, into a perilous battlefield for them. By late 1944, U-boat losses began to skyrocket, and their morale, already fragile, plummeted. The Wolfpack tactics that had once been their strength were yielding diminishing returns. Picture those submariners in the dark depths, drenched in cold sweat, their hearts racing as they replayed the deafening whirls of the depth charges exploding above them, no longer predators, but the hunted. To compound their predicament, American and British fleets had begun forming hunter-killer groups. These teams were formed through relentless practice and shared tactics, uniting in a singular purpose: to exterminate submarines before they could unleash their torpedoes. They moved with synchronized precision, like a well-oiled machine, covering massive areas of ocean, leaving no room for a U-boat to escape. It's almost haunting. Dozens of ships teaming up to hunt the underwater specters that haunted Allied seas, a dance of strategy, technology, and human resolve that turned the tides of war. The atmosphere aboard these vessels was electric with determination, camaraderie, and a shared resolve. Each ship was manned by young sailors, far from home, thrust into the depths of history, their lives at stake every time they set out on a mission. Together, they were more than just crews. They were brothers and sisters in arms, all focused on a singular goal, driven by the urgency of the moment. Meanwhile, as the U-boat crews faced increasing dread, the confidence of the Allies soared, setting the stage for a monumental shift in naval warfare. What was once Germany's hunting ground became a killing zone for anyone who dared to attack. The tide had turned, but the war was far from over. In the dim light of a cramped submarine, a German survivor recalls the moment their world shattered. "There was no warning," he whispers, his voice steady yet haunted. "Just the sound of splashes, and then everything broke." The terror in his eyes reveals the memories that haunt him, unlucky souls torn from their compartments in an instant as chaos engulfed their underwater sanctuary. Another survivor nods, recalling a sudden metallic rain that pounded against the hull, a grim prelude to catastrophe. "We felt a crushing pressure," he says, his breath quickening as he recounts the moment their reality twisted into a nightmare. These moments, shared by many, connect through the visceral fear of uncertainty. For those who escaped, the nightmare continued inside the icy depths. "Rising through freezing water, surrounded by oil and debris," one exclaims, the images of darkness and panic stirring within him again. Allied sailors, their hearts heavy with resolve, witnessed wreckage bubble up mere moments after a Hedgehog strike, clearer evidence of their deadly reach. The very thought of this invisible weapon spread like wildfire among U-boat crews, leading many to surrender rather than face another silent explosion from above. In those depths, survival became a gamble, and fear transformed into a chilling acceptance of fate. As 1944 unfolded, the relentless struggle of the Wolfpacks met a grim reality. The once favourable Atlantic Ocean had transformed into a hunting ground, infamous for claiming the lives of Germany's most skilled submarine sailors. Advances in radar and sonar technology, combined with vigilant air patrols, meant that the U-boats were no longer a threat. They were simply targets. Admiral Dönitz, a man known for his steadfast resolve, found himself facing undeniable despair. Privately, he admitted what many had feared: the submarine campaign was lost. With nearly 40,000 men who had ventured into the depths, a staggering 3 out of 4 would never make it back home. The odds were cruel, and many of these sailors met their fate at the hands of enemies they couldn't even see. Enter the Hedgehog, once dismissed by many as just another gimmick. This innovative anti-submarine weapon became a silent executioner, effectively turning the tide against the wolf packs. The mere presence of these devices struck fear into the hearts of U-boat commanders, who now faced threats from all angles. For those who stood aboard their submarines, it wasn't just about the loss of equipment or ships, it was the personal toll of war. Each name counted, each family left in waiting. In the shadows of the Atlantic, the human cost echoed louder than any explosion, turning heroic images of dogged sailors into harrowing tales of survival or, for many, never returning at all. As the dust settled and the echoes of war faded, Allied researchers turned their attention to the wreckage of U-boats littering the ocean floor. Their precise analysis revealed a staggering truth. U-boats, once formidable beasts of the deep, often lay split open, victims of a weapon that had redefined naval combat. The Hedgehog, with a hit rate 5 times higher than traditional depth charges, marked a crucial evolution in warfare. It wasn't just a weapon, it symbolized a profound shift from indiscriminate destruction to targeted precision. For those who once scoffed at its unconventional design, it was a bitter lesson learned too late. Survivors of those harrowing engagements often recalled the haunting memory of the quiet thump, the ominous sound that signaled their doom. The Hedgehog became a legacy, an ancestor to modern anti-submarine systems, from forward-thrown mortars to sophisticated guided torpedoes. In this pivotal moment of transition, the tides of war changed forever, teaching us that precision might just be the key to dominance at sea.